All right, James, you're up next. We got James here. He built the RV8 that's outside here. Did a nice, like I said, a nice entry. He likes to mess around formation flying with some of the guys down in Leesburg. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, like Mark and all the rest of them, right? He works for FEMA. And as a reservist, he was deployed twice to Somalia. So, and anyways, you could please welcome him and go right ahead and take it.
I'm here because Mark needed a last-minute guest speaker, and drinking beers at the hangar, and it's not in my mind. About me, I have that RV8 that's out there on the ramp. I started building it in 2018. I got to the really intense part when COVID hit, so I had nothing to do but build an airplane. Was able to get it done in just over 3 years. I've been flying it now for about 4 years. Awesome airplane. Really enjoy it. In my real job, which I'm currently not working at the moment for reasons that I'm sure most of you are familiar with, I work for FEMA as an air operations coordinator on the disaster side. So my job is to kind of manage all of the resources, aviation resources we need for disaster response, make sure everyone has what they need and things are going in the right place, and as with anything government or otherwise, keep track of how much money we're spending and try to minimize what we're spending. So kind of a lot of what goes into the resources you see and how things are working is just what's the least expensive way we can get this done. So far I've been on 3 major disasters: Hurricane Harvey back in 2017, Hurricane Helene last year, and then Hurricane Milton, which blew right over the top of me while I was down there helping with Helene. So Helene was kind of a unique situation. It hit Florida. We sent everyone down to Florida to help, and then it stalled over North Carolina and destroyed western North Carolina, and we had to start moving things back up to North Carolina, and nobody knew that was going to be needed. And that's a pretty remote area, so aviation kind of became a huge piece of that response. And then Milton hit, and we had to send a bunch of stuff back down to Milton. So that was a really busy 45-day. All right, so we can skip that part, because you already know who I am.
There you go.
Let's go back up one. Forgot about this. As a federal employee, I have to say the disclaimer. I'm here on my own. This is my own personal talk, not endorsed by the government or any part of, so that part's out of the way. We'll get this. There we go. All right, so what actually goes into emergency response on the aviation side? There is a lot. And FEMA doesn't actually control any aircraft or own any aircraft at the moment. We're trying to get into UAVs a little bit, but that's kind of down the line. What we do is we take what everyone else has and we start using it for various missions. So the main thing with kind of federal versus federal emergency response, and people don't seem to kind of understand this initially, is that everything we do by the request of state or local authorities. We are there to support. We do not generally go out and start doing things on our own. We find out what's needed and we help people get what's needed and get it where it's going. So the main things that we focus on are life-saving and life-sustaining missions. So these are aerial search and rescue, medevac, general population evac from remote areas. We had to do a lot of this in Helene and North Carolina just because there was a lot of people trapped with washed out bridges and needed medical care or needed to get somewhere where they actually had what they needed to survive. We move a lot of urban search and rescue teams. So we do control, I think, 12 urban search and rescue teams. Those are locally run, and we just call them up and federalize them when it's needed, and then they bring probably about 2 or 3 semi-trucks worth of equipment with them, so it's a big deal. Some of them have boats, some of them have specializations, so that usually requires a heavy lift asset, so we'll definitely use that. Movement of food and water to survivors in cutoff areas. That's when we get to do the parachute drop. Sometimes we avoid that at all costs because it's dangerous. People don't necessarily know you don't stand directly under the load when it's coming out of the sky. In a previous life in a foreign country, not here, I've seen that go poorly. So last resort. Generally, sling loads is kind of the way to go. You just get a helicopter and tie on the bottom, lower it down gently, and make sure there's someone there to keep track of it. And then movement of generator. Another big thing, generators are heavy, take up a lot of space. And if you can't get it there on truck, you have to get it there somehow. So generator movements is one of those things that, if you need a generator the size to power like a hospital, that could be a logistical challenge. Okay, next slide. And then the other type we have is operational and logistics support. So that should be remote. Spell check is not my friend. Remote sensing, so we do a lot of scans for damage assessment. If there are reports of trapped survivors or buildings destroyed or bridges washed out, we'll send an aircraft out to kind of just take a picture of that from the air, so we kind of know what the situation is, and we can send the resources there, or we can facilitate any kind of action that's needed that way. And then just more airlift type stuff, but less kind of life-sustaining. So obviously the life-saving and life-sustaining missions always take priority. The logistical stuff kind of comes second. And VIP visits happen a lot. All of the politicians want to come and get their picture taken, like I'm helping out. But they are not helping out, and that's part of the disclaimer. This is not official. It's just that they come down there, they get in the way, they get their pictures, and we try to get them out of there as quick as possible. One particular type of VIP is bigger trouble, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But see what that's. All right, next. All right, so airborne search and rescue. This is usually very early in the incident response period, highest mission priority initially. We need to make sure everyone is accounted for and rescued. Generally, rotary aircraft for rescue operations, but we could use any kind of aircraft, rotary, fixed-wing UAS for kind of the scans, just going out and doing the searching. If we need a hoist, there's like 2 agencies we can count on for hoist capability, excluding your kind of local resources. And anytime we're doing this, there is likely a TFR around the area. So generally, if a disaster comes in, there's going to be all sorts of things on, your sectionals. If you get the updated ones on ForeFlight, there's going to be all sorts of colors on it. Kind of good to know what those are. We'll get into that a little bit because that's probably what's most useful for any pilots in the room is what we're doing. Medical, and general population evacuation. So if there's an airfield nearby, we'll generally just use fixed wing to get them out because fixed wing are cheaper than rotary wing. If we need to use helicopters, we will. And that's just to get people to appropriate levels of care. So a lot of times we have hospitals that are shut down, or their generators running out, or they're running out of oxygen, running out of general needs, and then we will have a large list of people. This happened back in New Orleans and Katrina a lot. They had a 500-bed hospital that needed to be evacuated, and some of these people were on ventilators and needed basically ICU level care. So that requires a lot of resources. Firefighting, we don't really do this. This is mostly Forest Service, state and locals, but generally any types of aircraft that is busy airspace, you generally want to stay away from that. one for all of the aircraft that you can or can't see, 2 for the smoke. Generally, what you have is you'll have an observation aircraft following or leading an actual drop aircraft. So just because you think you're out of the way of this guy, the bigger guy's right behind him, and generally just a lot to coordinate, but. Generally, just want to stay away from those. But you have the, I don't know if you guys all remember Jake Patrick. He came and did the talk about the glass air a couple months ago. This is what he does on for one of his jobs. Has a lot of things to say about that. Aerial imagery. This is kind of the ongoing thing that we spend a lot of our time doing. So preliminary damage assessments, learning where everything is, and kind of figuring out for budgeting purposes how much we're going to have to rebuild. And what's going to be needed. So there's 2 types of that. We have the oblique. It's basically a guy in the back of the session with his Nikon taking pictures of the site from all 4 cardinal directions, getting a 360 view. We'll just send those up one at a time as needed if we have a report of something that requires more visualization. And then the surveys. So these are kind of flat scans, what you would see on Google Earth if you do the satellite view, but we can't just redirect the satellites, so we'll get aircraft up there. The people that are passengers on these flights hate them because you are going in a straight line and you're doing rudder turns the entire time and it's going back and forth. And if anyone has ever just done straight rudder turns, it's not the most comfortable or normal feeling for flying. So that will usually take several weeks depending on the size of the disaster. But this is just an example here. That's a tornado track that went through. I forgot. More tornado, local impact. I think that's Missouri, but there's just a big scour where underneath there the tornado came through, and just fly an aircraft over there and map it and send it back, and decision makers make decisions based on what they see.
What kind of aircraft?
That's a good question. We will cover that. So agencies that are involved, FEMA, obviously, we kind of coordinate the whole thing. We don't control anything except the money. And people aren't going to fly without getting paid. Happens a lot more often than people think because they're not doing it right. But that's kind of our role, and just kind of coordinating everything, making sure we know where everyone is and what everyone's doing. Sometimes certain states don't like to tell us what they're doing. They're flying under their own authority, and we get conflicts, we get duplication of efforts. We try to avoid that as much as possible. FAA obviously has control over the airspace. We can't do anything without the FAA's approval. If you jump a foot off the ground, you're in FAA territory, so everything has to be coordinated with them. They're usually very good about supporting. Sometimes we'll get a representative from the FAA to sit there next to us and help us out with any kind of airspace control issues or any other resources that they can provide. State and local agencies, they initiate all of the requests. Everything comes from a state or local agency. We don't just go out and do things on our own. They also provide a lot of resources. We can mission assign them and tell them, hey, can you help out with this, we need that. Or we just let them do their thing, and we try to stay out of the way as much as possible. And then other federal agencies, Coast Guard, Department of Defense, or War, depending on whatever it's called now. I think it's both for some reason. Customs and Border Patrol we use a lot of. We also get aircraft from NOAA, NASA, Civil Air Patrol, and many more. So Civil Air Patrol is kind of our favorite. You ask who usually does the imaging, it's usually Civil Air Patrol. We like them because they're everywhere. They're very eager to participate. Everyone wants to get up and fly, and they are cheap, very cheap. So, like I said, money is the driver of most decisions. All right, so Coast Guard, what they do is search and rescue. They actually have full authority on anything over navigable waters. So rivers, lakes, Great Lakes actually, not regular lakes. Gulf of Mexico, oceans, all of that stuff. Coast Guard has that. They do their thing. Nobody else really gets in their way. What's that?
It's the Gulf of America.
Gulf of America, you're right. Once again, I've not been fully gotten all that stuff out. But so mostly what we need to do is just keep track of what they're doing and stay out of their way. Especially if a hurricane comes in and there's boats out at sea, that happens a lot. And we got to let them handle the boats first before we can ask them to help us with our stuff. So, and then they can be directed by us for inland search and rescue. So usually once they're done with their water stuff, then we'll pull them in. The difference between what statutory authority means that it's their job, they pay for it. When we mission assign them for us, then that means it comes out of our pot of money. So this is probably not interesting to any of you, but this is just like there's so much paperwork that goes involved in it, just so the right people get paid the right amounts of money. I don't know why I volunteered for that job. And then obviously they've got just a wide variety of aircraft that we could use for anything we need. All right, Department of War or Defense. So Air National Guard, pretty easy. State controls that. We can ask the state for their National Guard. Use them however is needed. And the states can direct them too. DOD, like big military, they can provide anything you need. Whenever you want it. The only problem is that they're slow but also expensive. So when you order anything from big military, you don't just get like one helicopter. You get 8 helicopters and a refueler and like 50 people from ground support and the C-130 to support that. They send packages, not just individual aircraft. So what we can do with CAP for about $400 an hour is about $500,000 an hour for the DoD to use them, or DOW, whatever they call it now. But they, where we use them the most, we cover a huge area in the Pacific, so all the outlying territories, Marianas Islands, Guam, Saipan, Tinian, Samoa. People don't realize that when typhoons hit there, someone's still got to respond, and that someone is us. Usually the military is best positioned for that because they've got a lot of assets in Guam, Japan, and Hawaii that we can use to support any relief efforts there. So, next one. Customs and Border Protection. Does anyone know what that is? That's a reaper. Yeah, so believe it or not, they have those. That's very useful for imagery type missions. They have a lot more imagery capability than we need. And they could stay aloft forever. But what we really use Customs and Border Protection for is their A-Stars and their Blackhawks. They have a lot of them, and we're Homeland Security, they're Homeland Security. It's easy to just be like, hey, we need you to help out with this. And they're like, well, we're patrolling the border. I'm like, yeah, there's people dying over here. You figure out which one's more important. So we use Customs and Border Protection for a lot of our heavier assets just because it's easier to coordinate. Civil Air Patrol, like I said, these are our favorites. So they have a wide range of fixed-wing aircraft and a drone program. We use them for the aerial imagery and Usually they're very inexpensive. Anytime we need like small groups of people moved, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. VIP transports, these are great because you transport a VIP on a 172, they're not going to ask to go by air again. Yeah, and that's usually, it's like, yeah, there's your plane out there. Go see how much luggage you can bring with you. Yeah, definitely most useful resource. They have, it's called a Waldo pod. We'll mount on the strut there, and that's kind of our imagery pod to do the scanning imagery. It's very easy. They just download it to us, and we can make it all pretty with our mappers and send it off to people, and very useful. Also, for search and rescue, they can do this search and rescue sweeps, just fly around and look for people that need to be done. You can keep these guys in the air forever because when something, an actual mission happens for CAP, they're all over it and they want to be up there. So that's kind of our favorite. All right. So these are just the considerations we have. When we have a disaster, we need ways to control the airspace, and the only way we can do that is we ask the FAA to do it. Well, the state asks us, and we're the FAA, and we ask the FAA, everything goes to the FAA. So the main tools we have at our disposal are temporary flight restrictions. Try to put these up only when absolutely necessary and for the shortest period of time and cover the smallest geographic area. People hate these. Obviously, we have a big one over here that hasn't been used in a few months, which is nice. But it generally creates bad publicity in the aviation community, and we're trying to be not disruptive. Airspace coordination areas. So we don't really, it's kind of like a NOTAM, but slightly different. We don't use this anymore because when Helene and Milton hit Florida, we had the entire west coast of Florida covered under an ACA, and Elon Musk got really mad that said we were shutting down the entire airspace for Florida, and this is ridiculous. No, it's just an advisory. There's no requirements. There might be a notice that say, hey, just monitor this frequency while you're in here. That's all it is. So, and then advisory NOTAMs. This is what we use now. Just put a NOTAM out there. When you get in for a flight, it pops up and says there's a NOTAM, and it's a notice to airmen again. So I'll actually remember that. That's terminology I'm going to stick with. So it'll just kind of give you an idea of who you can talk to. And even with the TFRs, you can fly through them if you call ahead of time. We'll generally have a phone on a desk, and that'll be the TFR number, and it'll ring off the hook, and eventually we'll find a Civil Air Patrol guy to sit there and answer the phone. And it's just like, okay, squawk this code and transmit on this frequency, and you have this time block to get through the TFR. And it's usually not that big of a deal. With any TFR, you just got to call the controlling authority and you can get them through it. Not always. Sometimes you can. The other kind of TFR we have that I didn't put up here is a presidential TFR. So the president likes to come down to these disasters and do his photo ops and help out in the way politicians do. That happens, you get a huge TFR, and even search and rescue and all of these other missions stop. Everything's out of the air. You can't mess with the presidential TFR. He owns the airspace while he's there. And it's not just while he's airborne. It's it's a big bubble that surrounds him no matter where he's at. So presidential TFR, you can't really do anything. You can try to call the controlling authority. They're going to tell you, yeah, absolutely not. So if you want to see an F-16 up close, maybe. And this is one of our typical disasters. If you remember the 4th of July floods in Texas, this is the airspace we have under there. So we have the advisory NOTAM area, covers everything from Austin to San Antonio all the way up to, a random corner there, nice square area. But this is just, to keep an eye on things. And then we have the actual TFRs in the middle. Just follows the Guadalupe River. There's 3 of them. There's surface to 2,500, 5,000 to flight level 180, and then 5,000 to 5,500. This is just different aircraft. So the surface to 2,500 is probably UAS or drone activity. We just have, UAS is looking for survivors or remains, whatever happens to be left. The 5,000 to 5,500, that's because the Reaper is flying there, and anytime we fly a unmanned aircraft beyond visual range, you have to TFR it close because they can't see and avoid. And in this part of Texas, there's kind of some Class Charlies there, but there may or may not be ADSB, so it's just we need to keep people out of those areas. So I think that TFR was up for about 3 days, and then the 5,000 to flight level 180, I think, is also UAV activity. But this is generally, like I said, we try to minimize the TFRs and keep them in the smallest geographic area. And there's just a couple layers there, but yeah, it keeps everything out of the way. So, All right, so airports. Another thing we have to do is airport surveys and find out what airports can be used and what they can be used for and what capacity they have. So obviously some airports will be closed due to damage. We try not to close down airports, but I'd have to say if anything happened in this area, this airport right here would be perfect for disaster operations because there's plenty of space, multiple runways, and it's close to a bunch of resources. But generally, we're not going to close it down. We're just going to take up all of the ramp space and all of the fuel and all of the resources. So you can try to land there. You're just not going to get a lot of service. We can ask the FAA for temporary, or DOD even, for a temporary tower. So if you've ever been to Leesburg and saw the little horse trailer tower that's out there, they can bring those for you, set them up. So if you're flying into an area that's impacted by a disaster, there might be an uncontrolled airport on your chart that is actually controlled and has a tower operating. So that's why it's a good idea to read your NOTAMs and understand what you're getting into. Yeah, that's generally very helpful. And then due to capacity and resource constraints, we will close down some airports, not close them down, but limit access. So in North Carolina, once again, I don't know if you remember Operation Airdrop. They were flying out of Leesburg a lot. They overwhelmed some airports, so we had to put that under a PPR, so prior permission request. So we know when everyone's coming, where we can put them, how many people are going to be there, how long it's going to take to offload stuff and send them on their way. If we're going to need to get any fuel up there, because some of these are small little airports in the mountains. Gas might be a challenge, and we don't want airplanes stuck on these fields, and we need them for operations. We actually had one airport, and I can't remember what it was called, a little tiny one up on the side of a mountain. They had something like 700 helicopters try to land there in a space of about 4 hours because they were trying to help out. So, generally, it's how much ramp space you have and how many aircraft are on the ground are going to possibly limit what airports you can go to. So it's good to call ahead, let them know what you're doing, and then obviously, they may or may not have gas. So your plane might get to live at a destroyed airport for a few weeks while they get that taken care of. So don't just show up and try to help. Coordinate with somebody, voluntary agencies. Operation Airdrop is good. Any of these other like Angel Flight or the pet rescue ones, all of those are good, but just make sure you're working with someone. If you just show up, then you're probably going to get in the way, and you're probably just not going to have a good time. We had a lot of, once again, negative news reports because people were showing up trying to help. It's like, well, we don't know what to do with you. We didn't plan on you being here. We can't just start assigning you missions because then you work for us, and then if anything happens, use your imagination. So that's just what I like to tell. Call ahead if you're going to be flying through any of these airspace restricted areas or advisory areas. Just know what's going on, know who you need to talk to, make sure that everyone knows where you're at. Read your NOTAMs and familiarize yourself with any guidance in these areas. And if you want to help, just coordinate with a volunteer organization or join CAP. And you can be up in the sky doing rudder turns for 8, 12 hours at a time. They're almost good pay. If you're trying to build hours for any of the future airline guys here. Oh, thank you, Matt. Yes, that would help. So I think that might be it. Is there any more? Oh yeah, questions. All right, that's my airplane. Go ahead.
I'm actually curious, you've been talking a lot about UASs. What kind of technologies in UAS advancement over, say, like the past 5-10 years have gotten you excited, especially in the context of FEMA and rescue?
So that's a good question. Past 5 or 10 years, a lot happened about 5 or 10 years ago with, all of the small quadcopters, a lot of capability there. But it's just nice to be able to just kind of throw something up in the air and have full situational awareness of what's going on. So our urban search and rescue teams use them a lot when they're working in a confined space, and they just kind of need to see where everyone's at and monitor it and find areas to focus on for their search and rescue efforts, and that stuff's very helpful. Yes, sir.
With like organizations like Operation Airdrop, I'm guessing you guys can't reach out to them; they reach out to you more for like volunteer services.
Well, so we will reach out to them if they show up and start creating logistical
They just
issues.
show up.
Yeah. That's kind of what happened because I think Helene was their biggest operation to date, and they showed up in force. And it was going on for a while. And we're just like, okay, we needed to pull them in and be like, okay, we need to come up with a plan so everyone's on the same page. We know what you're doing, and we can start feeding some requests to you on like, oh, these are the supplies that people need. Because just showing up with rolls of paper towels and diapers may be helpful, maybe not be helpful. We just have to find a place to put it all. So, having someone, and usually it's like the Red Cross and Salvation Army kind of help with that stuff. Tell them what kind of stuff to focus on so they can put it out to their pilots. I'm like, hey, this is the stuff you need to bring down. So, we generally don't reach out to them until we need to, and then, they'll ask like, hey, what are you guys doing? Can you help with this? And, can you limit yourselves over here or over here? Avoid the helicopters and the drones, just keep things coordinated. So, coordination's the name of the game. Yes, ma'am.
So you talked about all the federal, state, and local agencies that you guys work with, but you didn't touch base on any of the NGOs or volunteer organizations. So is that done through the FEMA side, that if you're in the air side, or is it through state and local or whoever's running those?
It's generally through us. So the way this works is we'll have an air operations coordinator sitting there in the emergency operations center from FEMA, and we will have a state counterpart sitting right next to us. So we're talking to each other. Everything's coming through both. And then once again, we have more liaisons because you can't have enough liaison officers. So these voluntary organizations will send a liaison, be the one point of contact that they can reach out to us. We can, have the conversation back and forth. That way we're not just, a random guy shows up in his Cirrus and wants to unload, 82 cans of cat food or whatever. So, we talk to the airdrop liaison or whatever other volunteer organization we have. And we encourage them to reach out to us.
So who, as a possible volunteer for a disaster, who should we contact to volunteer?
Honestly, if you just reach out to whatever organization, so it depends on what role you want to fill too. Like what are your interests and what you want to do. Find the agency or the organization that specializes in that and just reach out to them. And then, every time, some of these organizations will just show up without notifying us or without a plan, and then we have to kind of work that through. But it's better to be organized than to just show up.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times that causes additional rescues because people get in over their heads. Hopefully that answers your question. If you have more specific questions, we can talk and I can point you in the right direction. All right. Anything else? So if there's no more questions, that's all I have. Hopefully it was somewhat informative.
Yeah.
Not